Hello, and welcome to demonstration 29.1, integrating a RESTful repository that does not require any authentication with Syndeia Cloud via the web dashboard. We will be using the SpaceX data repository. This is an open source repository that provides data for SpaceX launches, payloads, and other details. This repository only serves as an example of integrating repositories, tools, data sources in your own organization that provides a RESTful API and need to be a part of the digital thread. In this demonstration, we will go through the following steps. We'll show you how to integrate an example RESTful repository, specifically the SpaceX data repository. This repository does not require an authentication. We'll show you how to add a new RESTful repository in the Syndeia web dashboard. We will show you how to add RESTful requests to that repository. We'll show you how to view responses for those requests in the web dashboard. We'll show you how to clone those requests to create new requests, and then organize those requests using collections. With Syndeia Cloud 3.5, you can integrate repositories or data sources in your organization that provide a RESTful API using various authentication types: no authentication, basic authentication, static bearer tokens, static API keys, or dynamic auth tokens, example using OAuth and JWT. This video will focus on integrating a repository that does not require any authentication. With that, let's move on to the Syndeia web dashboard and get down to the details. When you open up the Syndeia web dashboard, you can go to the repositories panel and you will see an icon here that represents RESTful repositories, a category for all RESTful repositories. In this case, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be integrating the SpaceX data repository. This is an open source repository with data about SpaceX launches. The details of this RESTful API is available on GitHub. You can browse through that. It is an excellent resource for getting started with working with REST APIs or learning REST APIs. You can click on the docs link here and it'll take you to the collection in Postman, which has a series of requests that you can make to this repository and examples of responses. For example, we'll be trying out the list of all rockets. It shows you the requests you can make to get all rockets and the responses you can get. So these are the kind of requests that we'll try out with the Syndeia web dashboard. So the first thing we will do is to integrate and add the SpaceX data repository. Now for that, I'll go and copy this URL. This is the base URL for the repository. I'll go to RESTful, add a repository with this base URL. That is because this is the URL which is common to all the requests that we'll be making to get rockets or payloads or launches and other requests. We'll give it a name. We'll give it a description. We'll keep it simple. Authentication type, none. Press the create button. This will add a RESTful repository with that URL as the base repository. If you expand this repository in the tree view, you will see that it will take a few seconds to initialize and prepare a default collection. Now, once this is initialized, you will see that all the requests that you want to add to this RESTful repository can be organized using collections. There is a default collection already available. If you do not specify a collection in the beginning as you add requests, they'll all go under the default collection. Think of collections as folders, as logical groupings of the requests that you want to add to a repository. To add a new request, we'll right-click on either the repository or the collection in the tree view and select this menu, Manage RESTful Requests and Collections. You will see two tabs here, a list of all the collections. In this case, there's only one default collection, and a list of all requests. There aren't any right now. We'll add a new request, and this is a request to get all rockets. We'll give it a meaningful name, a description, and you can see the base URL we specified for the repository is already there with a /. So we just need to add the rockets endpoint. Now this endpoint is already provided by the API description for this repository. You can see that if you hit the rockets endpoint, if you send a request to this endpoint, you'll get a response to get all rockets. So we'll do that. We don't need to provide any more details like query parameters or headers or any form body. We can click the test button. And now we can see that we have received a response, and you can see a JSON response to get all rockets. You can click on the Save button. This will save this request. We can close the Manage Request and Collection panel. And if we expand the default RESTful collection, now we can see that request. You can see it's a GET request, and this is a request to get all rockets. If I expand the request right now, Syndeia Cloud will make a request to that remote repository, the SpaceX data repository, and try to fetch the data from that repository. So here the request get all rockets was sent by Syndeia Cloud, and the response received from the SpaceX data repository is now shown. So the act of expanding the request makes the request or sends the request to the RESTful repository, in this case the SpaceX data repository, wherever it is sitting in the World Wide Web, fetches the response and displays it. So this is happening in real time. Now when you see the response here, you'll see that there are 4 elements in this response. If we expand this, you can see that these are the 4 elements. These are probably the 4 rockets. And for each of those rockets, you have 23 data fields inside each. So if I expand the first one, we can see its details. So this is the Falcon 1 rocket. And if I expand the mass in pounds and kilograms is mentioned here, shows the number of stages in the rocket, shows the first flight, shows the description. This is the raw data that is coming from that RESTful repository. Syndeia Cloud is just making that raw data, typically available as a JSON format, visible to you in a tree view in the web dashboard. So this could represent any data source that you may want to integrate with Syndeia Cloud. Just provide the request. Syndeia Cloud will make that request. From the web dashboard, you'll get a response. Syndeia Cloud will render that response in the tree view. Let's look at the second rocket here. This is a Falcon 9 rocket. Again, 2 stages, and the mass and kilograms and pounds also available. You can see all of the details. This is the full response coming from that repository. Let's look at the third rocket. This is the Falcon Heavy rocket. You can also notice that each rocket has an ID. We'll be using that to make another request very soon. If we wanted to get just one specific rocket, we'll be able to do that. So let's go to the repository or the collection and right click and go to the Manage RESTful Collections and Request panel. And we want to add another request just to get a specific rocket, in this case the Falcon Heavy. Now I can follow the same process to add a new request and fill out those details, but I can also clone this request and make a copy of it. And in this case, I'll make a request to get the Falcon Heavy rocket, request to get the Falcon Heavy rocket. And in this case, I will append the ID of the rocket as a path parameter. Now, how do I know this? Again, the description of this API, the API for this RESTful repository is available on the GitHub, is available on Postman openly. And so you could use that. And here I'm providing the ID of the rocket as a path parameter. Again, no query parameters or headers or form body to be sent. If I click on the test button, I can see the response received for just the Falcon Heavy rocket. I can click on the clone button to create a clone of that request. So now I have a specific request for the Falcon Heavy rocket. Let's also go ahead and add another request. In this case, I'll add a request to get all payloads. Again, I can make a clone and just change rockets to payloads. Change the name, get all payloads, request to get all payloads. If I click on the test button, I can see the response to get all payloads has come through with a green box around it. If I click on the clone button, and now I can close this panel. If I collapse and expand the default RESTful collection, I can see now 2 new requests have been added. The request to get the Falcon Heavy rocket has been added. If I expand that, that request was sent to the RESTful repository, specifically the SpaceX data repository. We got a response with the details of just the Falcon Heavy rocket this time. And you could see the name of the rocket, the mass of that rocket in pounds and kilograms, the diameter of the rocket, and other details. So you can make a request to get all the rockets in this case, or get a specific rocket, and this is made available by that REST API for that repository. We also had another request to get all payloads, and that's available here. If I expand that request, I can see the response for that request. And in this case, there are quite a few payloads. There are 136 of them. Each payload is listed here. And if I expand the first one, I can see 11 fields. For example, the ID of that payload, the mass in kgs and mass in pounds, the orbit, manufacturer, etc. A couple of things regarding this tree that might be helpful. The G stands for a request. So if it's a GET request or a POST request, you'll see a G or a P icon next to it. If you see square brackets, that means it's a collection of responses. So in this case, we're making a request to get all payloads. So you're getting an array or a collection of payloads. So you'll see a square bracket. And if you see a curly brace or a curly bracket, that means it's a single object, but has got many fields in it. So in this case, we're talking about one specific payload. And then that payload can have many fields. Some of those fields can again be a collection, like in this case, the NORAD ID, or customers, that could be an array. Some of these fields could also be another array. So you can have collections inside collections. Now these icons are very standard JSON representations. So that's part of the JSON standard. So there's nothing new here or nothing Syndeia specific here. We're just using the right icons to show whether the data you're getting is a collection of objects, is it a single object. And the third thing you'll see is quotes, which represents a primitive object, typically strings or integers or booleans that are primitive, low-level objects. They'll be shown using the string notation that represents a primitive. Now we've added 3 requests, and you can see the responses here. What we'll also go ahead and do right now is to try to organize this request. I want to make sure that I can organize the request related to rockets in one collection and the request related to payloads in another collection, because the number of requests is going to grow over time, and we want to keep this space well organized. This is very similar to how you create folders to organize your files. If I right-click on that repository or the collection, I can go to collections and I can add a new collection. In this case, I'll add a rockets collection. Give it a description. I'll add another collection, payloads. Create that. Now we see 2 new collections. If I create new requests now, I can select that specific collection where the request should be added. But note that we already have requests that have been created, and I just want to move them. So I can click on the edit button here, and I can go ahead and change that collection for this request to get all payloads. I can uncheck the default collection and click on the payloads collection. You could have a request in multiple collections, and that's also allowed, and that can be useful sometimes, specifically when you want to organize collections using different ways, like by themes or by types of request or frequency collections that I want to run every day versus every week, every hour, etc. So in this case, I'm going to want to move them to the payloads collection. I click on the update button here, and that will set that in the payloads collection. Similarly, for the rockets request, I want to move this to the rockets collection. Click update. And the get Falcon Heavy rocket, I also want to move that to the rockets collection. Click update. And now I can see that there are these collections and these requests, and you can see if you click on the collection itself, like if you click on the rockets collection, you can now see the specific request only in the rockets collection. If you click on the payloads collection, you can see the request only in the payload collection. So clicking on a collection will show you the request in that specific collection. Now, in a similar way, you can add new requests and organize them into new collections. When you add a new collection and you want it to show in the repository, simply collapse and expand the repository, and those new collections will show up. If you add new requests to an existing collection, simply collapse and expand the collection itself, and those requests will show up. Remember, we had the rockets and the payloads collection. The rockets collection had 2 requests to get all rockets and get the Falcon Heavy, and the payload collection had a request to get all payloads. I've gone ahead and added new requests to get missions, launches, cores, and capsules for SpaceX data. In summary, you've seen an example of how to add new RESTful repositories, how to add new RESTful requests, how to add new RESTful collections, organize those requests into collections, view the responses from those requests in the Syndeia web dashboard, how to add new requests using cloning, how to edit the requests, and so on. Hopefully this has been useful to you. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach us at our help desk. Just simply go to intercax.com/help and open a new support request with any questions or concerns you may have regarding this video or this demonstration. Thank you and have a great day.